Folks, we have a huge problem. The mysterious structures that the James Webb Telescope recently uncovered prove that all our previous assumptions about the universe are wrong. But why should the breathtaking, sensational discoveries not actually exist? Why are even the most experienced astronomers baffled? And if the cosmos didn't come into being as part of the Big Bang, how was it born? The edge of the universe. First, let's address a very general question. What is actually at the edge of the universe, and how is it constructed? Well, the revealing answer to this question is, we don't have a clue. This is primarily because we don't even know if something like a cosmic edge exists at all. Despite all space flights, probes, and modern telescopes, the totality and the form of the cosmos still embodies the great unknown. The background of the Big Bang theory suggests that the universe is spherical, but this is only one of many assumptions. When it comes to the question of the shape, other geometric objects are also consulted, including the donut-shaped torus and even a trumpet. But what is it actually about the much-cited infinity of the cosmos? Although this term is used all too often, the truth is that we do not know whether it corresponds to reality. It is important here, however, that we keep in mind the difference between infinity and unboundedness, because basically is valid. Even if the volume of the universe is finite, it could be boundless. But what is meant by this apparent contradiction? Well, to illustrate this, experts often refer to the example of a small ant. If the creepy crawly were placed on the surface of a balloon, it could run for any length of time in any direction imaginable without ever encountering a marked-out edge. To the insect, it would seem as if it was moving along an infinitely large structure, even though this is of course not true in the case of a balloon. At this point, however, it should be noted that this is a highly simplified illustrative example. In contrast to the balloon, the universe is not embedded in a higher dimensional space according to classic cosmology. The edge of the universe. Does the universe now possess an edge? Yes, definitely. Well, this is at least true for us. Against the background of the cosmological principle, which says that the universe always presents itself to the observer in the same way, independent of his point of view and his direction of observation, there is a spherical space around the Earth, which limits our view to the stars. Since the Big Bang occurred about 13.8 billion years ago, one might think that the distance to our cosmic visual limit is consequently 13.8 billion light-years. But this is a fallacy. In this respect, we should remember that the universe is by no means a rigid, unchanging construct, but an entity that has always been expanding. However, the universe does not grow thereby into an existing space. It is rather the space itself which becomes unceasingly larger. The cosmic expansion causes that already covered distances were extended subsequently. Why the distance to the observation horizon is not 13.8 but 46.6 billion light-years. Those remote objects and structures which mark out today the border area of our universe were at the time of their formation only 40 million light-years away from us. However, because they crossed the event horizon some time ago, it is impossible to make any statements about their current processes. All we have left is this galactic view into the past. No less uncertain is the question, which secrets are hidden behind the observable universe? While some researchers assume that the areas that are invisible to us are structured in much the same way as those known to us, others suspect that there are things slumbering in the hidden regions of the universe that are beyond our imagination. A new age of research. The revolutionary James Webb Space Telescope is so powerful that it could even sense the warmth of a bumblebee on the moon from Earth. Set out into the vast expanse of space on December 25, 2021, Webb has since dedicated to the gripping task of uncovering the hidden mysteries of space and revolutionizing our knowledge of the universe. Specially designed for infrared astronomy, the $10 billion instrument is in some cases 100 times more sensitive to electromagnetic waves than its scientific predecessor Hubble. In the coming years, the goal will be to observe the first luminous objects and galaxies in space, to decipher the structural evolution of the cosmos, and to analyze black holes, stars, and galaxies. Furthermore, Webb will help answer what is probably mankind's oldest question: are we alone in the universe? Given the thousands and thousands of objects that sparkle at us in the night sky, is it even possible that Earth is the only celestial body that harbors life? To crack this fundamental mystery, the James Webb Telescope is turning its technical gaze to exoplanets to study their atmospheres for the potential friendliness of life. So far, the Space Telescope has lived up to its high expectations with flying colors. The first images presented last July already left the world public completely stunned. While the images reach an unprecedented level of detail and reveal areas that seem invisible to Hubble and company, Webb was even able to detect the oldest galaxies known so far. Some of these gravitationally bound star collections existed already 235 million years after the Big Bang. To the classification, our Earth entered the cosmic stage only 9.2 billion years after the birth of the universe. However, some sensational discoveries come with a huge catch. Instead of expanding and deepening our knowledge of the universe, they show us how little we really understand of the big picture. Things get especially tricky when Webb discovers something that shouldn't even exist. An impossible discovery. What began as 6 inconspicuous points of light in space eventually resulted in a cosmological crisis. But what had happened? To uncover new details on the first near-infrared images from the James Webb Telescope, a team from Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne took another look at the corresponding datasets. While the experts were analyzing the section of sky near the Big Dipper, however, an unusual detail caught their eye. 6 objects with a reddish glow whose age was quantified as more than 13 billion years on the basis of redshift. Accordingly, these light sources existed already 500 to 700 million years after the formation of the universe. From the further investigations, it became clear that all points show all characteristics which are typical for very early galaxies. The problem: their mass goes beyond the limits of our common cosmology. Actually, the researchers had expected that such early galaxies always embodied cosmic dwarfs. In reality, however, the structures were already as far developed as our Milky Way. But how is this possible at all? How can the galaxies host more than 10 billion solar masses of stars if the necessary matter for it was not yet present at all? Against the background of this apparent contradiction, scientists at first suspected that they had made a mistake, but they were wrong. Repeated data evaluations clearly showed that the mysterious structures existed in the presumed form. Even if only one of the detected galaxies is real, this would be tantamount to a dramatic upheaval of conventional cosmology. To explain the mere existence of the formations, the density of matter in the early cosmos would have been up to 5 times greater than previously assumed. The alternative explanation is based on the thesis that the surprisingly massive galaxies were formed in a way that is completely unknown to us. In one way or another, our previous theories about the development of the universe and its structures are being shaken up. Fundamental doubts. These and other puzzling discoveries are causing more and more researchers to turn away from the current Big Bang theory. The competing hypotheses are as numerous as they are exciting. Do we really live inside a black hole? Is our cosmos only the vanishing small link in an infinite chain of further universes? Or is the universe ultimately nothing more than a simulation? Basically is valid. Even if the origin of the universe seems to be everything else than unambiguously decoded, the experts agree in one point: the cosmos will reach its end sooner or later. A thesis which contains itself with the end of the universe hears on the name Big Crunch. This says that the universe will collapse one day under the influence of the gravitational force and will finally complete a kind of reverse Big Bang. Where this exciting conjecture is spun a bit further, the Big Bang becomes a big bounce. In other words, the universe has always gone through a universal cycle, with the end of one universe always marking the beginning of another. According to the Big Bounce theory, our cosmic world will also collapse one day, paving the way for a subsequent universe. Thereby, the interplay of demise and rebirth would repeat itself indefinitely. Not less exciting appears the theory, which is represented in particular by Nicodem Papalowski of the University of New Haven. In truth, we are inside of a black hole. In detail, the later cosmos was initially in the form of a tiny primordial seed. As soon as the point was reached at which the matter in the inside of the black hole could not be compressed further, the several billion solar masses heavy seed experienced a big rebound. It literally burst and started the unfolding of the universe. But as exciting as the individual theses may seem, they leave one fundamental question unanswered. What happened before? Did such a before exist at all? But if the universe or its predecessor was literally forming out of nothing, what created the nothing? All these questions go beyond the limits of human imagination. Whether they will ever receive a clear answer is literally written in the stars.
The mystery of Oumuamua has finally been cracked. Since the mysterious object plunged into our solar system 6 years ago, it has posed daunting problems for even the most experienced experts. But what's really up with the strange flight behavior of the interstellar visitor? And why is a renowned Harvard professor convinced that we are not dealing with an ordinary comet here, but with an extraterrestrial spaceship? In October 2017, modern space exploration was enriched by a significant milestone. For the first time, experts identified an object in the solar system that was clearly classified as interstellar. However, the initial euphoria soon gave way to a great deal of guesswork. The characteristics of the spacecraft were so unusual and strange that no scientist knew what we were dealing with here at all. Discovered by the Pandoras Telescope in Hawaii and christened Oumuamua, the experts initially thought the interstellar visitor was a comet. However, this assessment was shaken when neither a tail nor a so-called coma could be detected during closer observations. So it came that only 1 week after the discovery, the astronomical turnaround followed, and Oumuamua was considered from now on as an asteroid. However, even this categorization was overshadowed by some huge question marks. The object exhibited a flight behavior that broke all known patterns. But one after the other, when Oumuamua was discovered and added to the star charts, it was already on its way back into interstellar space. The experts' calculations showed that it had passed through its closest point, to the Sun, on September 9th, while Oumuamua was approaching our host star up to 37.6 million kilometers. It was racing through space at a top speed of 87.3 kilometers per second. However, it was precisely this approach to the Sun that left scientists completely baffled. In detail, the closer analysis revealed a peculiar orbital deflection. That is, when the body moved away from the Sun, it flew a little faster than the pure influence of gravity would have allowed. From then on, the researchers had to find out what the background of the mysterious acceleration was. At first, the outgassing of volatile components was listed as a possible explanation. This process is anything but unusual and takes place, among other things, when a body is strongly heated. However, outgassing is usually accompanied by a significant change in rotational behavior, a characteristic that could not be detected in the case of Oumuamua. Further peculiarities. To uncover Oumuamua's true identity, the researchers pointed virtually all the telescopes at their disposal at the object. In doing so, they quickly determined that the craft undergoes exceptionally intense brightness fluctuations, suggesting that its shape is reminiscent of an oversized cigar. However, the data collected was not sufficient to reconcile the brightness fluctuations with a matching rotational behavior. With this in mind, it is reasonable to conclude that Oumuamua does not rotate about one of its major axes, but is literally tumbling through space. Since no dust could be detected in the immediate vicinity of the object, scientists assume that it contains no water, and possibly consists entirely of metal. With regard to the exact dimensions, the experts must rely on estimates in the absence of tangible data, depending on which values are entered for the reflectivity, density, internal tensile strength, and axis of rotation. Different dimensions result. So it is conceivable that Oumuamua is either 800 or just 100 meters long. And also concerning the origin, the experts owe us a clear answer. The vague approach only says that the direction of origin is probably somewhere in the constellation Lyra. Shortly after its classification as an asteroid, Oumuamua was classified as a comet again, but this classification does not convince every expert. So other studies come to the result that we have to do here with a body which consists of frozen hydrogen. Possibly Oumuamua is also a stock material ice fragment, which was blasted out once from a Pluto-similar exoplanet. In a somewhat different vein again are the thoughts expressed on this topic by Harvard professor Avi Loeb. What if the interstellar visitor has no natural background at all, but was artificially created? An extraterrestrial spaceship? Born on February 26, 1962 in Beit Hanan, Israel, Avi Loeb is not exactly what you would call an uncontroversial researcher. In fact, it wasn't long ago that the theoretical physicist once again hit the headlines with a hotly debated claim. He claimed to have found some mysterious objects of unknown origin at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean that could indicate, quote, extraterrestrial technology. In detail, these were hundreds of mini-spheres of interstellar origin, which Loeb recovered in the remains of a meteorite. And speaking of extraterrestrial, you surely remember the alleged alien mummies presented in the Mexican parliament in September. Avi Loeb also participated in this highly publicized event. While online, he talks about the search for extraterrestrial objects in the atmosphere and in the solar system. With this knowledge in mind, no one should be surprised by what Loeb had to say about Oumuamua. We are possibly dealing with the artificially created object of an extraterrestrial civilization. In detail, the observed orbital deviation as well as the lack of dust formation would perfectly match the properties one would expect from an extremely thin object of large area. Loeb speculated that Oumuamua would in fact embody a solar sail, that is, a body powered by the radiation pressure of the sun or another star. Especially exciting, also the other researchers did not exclude that the interstellar visitor was artificially created. For this reason, the radio telescope at the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia targeted Oumuamua to search for possible signals of artificial origin. However, the data, which were collected over a period of 2 weeks, drew a rather sobering picture for the UFO supporters. No references to artificial signals could be found. The riddle solution? Although Oumuamua's excursion into the solar system is meanwhile already 6 years ago, the object should make the headlines again recently. After all the theories were put forward and later discarded, the redeeming news finally followed a few months ago. Astronomers have cracked the riddle of Oumuamua. However, we should perhaps mention at this point that these are purely theoretical considerations and models, which provide a plausible explanation, but have not been directly proven at Oumuamua. But be that as it may, it is certain that no researcher has ever before seen a comet that does not have a dust coma and accelerates in such a strange way as Oumuamua. Now, however, Daryl Seligman and his colleague, Jennifer Bergner, have succeeded in reconciling the strange circumstances with a coherent theory. Accordingly, the solution to the riddle is called hydrogen propulsion. The experts came to this conclusion by examining a series of laboratory tests conducted between the 1970s and 1990s. The series of tests showed that water ice can decay into molecular hydrogen under the influence of intense cosmic radiation, and a body moving through the interstellar medium is literally cooked by this very radiation, according to the researchers. Against this background, it seems reasonable to assume that Oumuamua also formed hydrogen. The problem: in order to explain the speed thrust, which the object covered during its orbit around the Sun, the hydrogen should not have escaped immediately into space. But the scientists had a suitable explanation for this as well. According to them, the hydrogen initially remained trapped in the pores of the ice. The theoretical calculations showed that this is anything but improbable. Most of the hydrogen formed in the ice under interstellar conditions remains enclosed in the water matrix. This changes only when the icy prison warms up to temperatures of -258 to -133 degrees Celsius. As long as this temperature limit is not exceeded, the water ice remains amorphous In other words, it does not crystallize until the corresponding warming occurs. While Oumuamua was visiting our home system, the theory goes, the sun's rays heated the object's outer crust, causing the water ice to change structure. The pores that opened in the ice allowed the volatile hydrogen gas to escape. This also explains why the outgassing appeared invisible to terrestrial scientists. The molecular hydrogen could not be identified by spectroscopic examinations. Thus, it had the optical appearance that the missile had neither a characteristic tail nor a coma. Unlike the conventional outgassing of comets, the escape of hydrogen would also not produce significant dust. Even if the icy matrix should have contained dust, this was most likely not carried out during the outgassing. This is all well and good, but is this special form of outgassing sufficient to explain the puzzling acceleration of Oumuamua? The answer is yes, as long as the missile has comparatively compact dimensions. In the case of a comet several kilometers in size, the outgassing would probably have no significant influence on the flight behavior. But if the cigar-shaped something is only 100 meters long and 20 meters thick, the process could have generated enough thrust to set the observed acceleration in motion. The bottom line is that the experts believe their model can also reveal the background of comparable objects. In fact, since the discovery of Oumuamua, 6 other small comets have been found that did not have tails or comas, and despite that, underwent smaller bursts of velocity. And first-hand information may soon be available. The Japanese spacecraft Hayabusa 2 is currently heading toward asteroid 1998 KY26, which it is expected to pass and study in detail in 2031.
Could we become the Galileo Galilei of our time? The Italian universal scholar proved that the worldview of his era was nothing but a dramatic fallacy. The sun does not revolve around the Earth, but the other way around. Now, the James Webb Telescope has revealed another revolutionary insight. Our common cosmology simply does not match reality. But what does this mean for our understanding of the universe? If the cosmos did not come into being as part of the Big Bang, how was it born? Dive with us into the mind-blowing world of galactic mystery. The Look Back. On December 25, 2021, the time had come. Together with the James Webb Telescope, the hopes and dreams of earthly scientists set out into the gigantic expanses of the cosmos. Specially designed for infrared astronomy, Webb pursues no lesser task than to revolutionize our knowledge of the universe. To achieve this, the most powerful space telescope of all time is literally looking back in time. One of its main scientific goals is to study the first luminous objects and galaxies that were formed after the Big Bang and during the so-called Dark Ages 13.5 billion years ago. But this is by no means all. Equipped with skills that exceed those of the predecessor Hubble telescope by a factor of 100, Webb is also taking a closer look at the formation backgrounds of galaxies, stars, planets, and black holes. Furthermore, the $10 billion instrument will help answer what is probably the oldest question in human history. Are we alone in the universe? Given the thousands and thousands of objects in the night sky, is it even possible that Earth is the only celestial body in the universe that harbors life? In this regard, Webb analyzes the atmospheres of exoplanets with regard to their potential habitability. The first images, which were presented to the interested world in July 2022, already gave an idea that Webb would live up to his high expectations with flying colors. From the stellar cradle NGC 3324, to the galactic group of 5 Stephan's Quintet, to the Southern Ring Nebula 2,500 light-years away, Webb provided us with space insights in an unprecedented level of detail. The so-called Webb's first deep field caused a particular sensation. Taken with the near-infrared camera, NIRCam, the image shows us the galaxy cluster SMACS 0723, 4.6 billion light-years away. Compared to Hubble's image of this region of the sky, Webb's image captivates us with its overwhelming degree of sharpness. Here, structures are made visible that were still hidden in the past. The discovery of the impossible. We have discovered something here that is so unexpected that it poses a real problem for science. This statement by Joel Leah, in the employ of Pennsylvania State University, mercilessly brings home to us a fact. The James Webb Telescope is uncovering not only the mysteries of the cosmos, but also our own ignorance. But what had happened? Why is the astronomical community currently in a full-blown research crisis? Well, originally, everything began with 6 inconspicuous light points. These had hidden themselves in a series of photographs which show us together 700 early galaxies. In detail, the gravitationally bound collections of stars already existed more than 13 billion years ago. That is, in an era when the universe itself was just 500 to 700 million years old. Basically, our theoretical models say that the first stars shone about 200 to 300 million years after the Big Bang. However, experts are still puzzling over when the glittering bright celestial bodies first came together to form galaxies and how quickly they grew up. In the meantime, scientists have identified a number of ancient galaxies in the Webb images. These structures existed 300 million years after the birth of the universe. And just as the experts had expected in advance, the galactic associations still presented themselves as very small and low mass. However, the 6 newly discovered galaxies should go beyond any theoretical framework. Despite their early date of formation, they are almost as massive as our Milky Way today. When the researchers from Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne looked at the section of sky near the Big Dipper, they realized that the light from the 6 sources took more than 13 billion years to reach our terrestrial eye. Furthermore, the spectroscope analysis showed that we are dealing with very early galaxies. But how is it at all possible that the structures present themselves not as galactic tiny ones, but as full-grown giants? Well, the unrevealing answer from the experts is, it's not. According to our official models, the galaxies should simply not exist in this form. The background. 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang, there was simply not yet enough normal matter to form so many stars in so short time. If one follows the remarks of the researchers, then the new discovery stands in the glaring contradiction to practically all usual models of the cosmology. An unsolved mystery. Since the formations were significantly more massive than scientists had ever expected, they initially believed that they had made a mistake. However, this suspicion was not to be substantiated during the subsequent troubleshooting. But how then can this finding be explained? Basically, is valid. The cosmos is interested in cordially little which theories the terrestrial scientists put up. The processes of the universe are correct, one way or the other. To explain the existence of the massive galaxies at such an early time, the density of matter in the young universe would have to have been up to 5 times greater than postulated so far. The other, not less confusing explanation approach is based on the fact that the galaxies originated in a way which is completely unknown to us up to now. The tender rest hope of the astronomers consists now in the fact that the galaxies turn out in the aftermath nevertheless still as dust-covered black holes. However, if only one of these galaxies should be real, our understanding of the cosmology is completely thrown over the heap. Some experts seize the puzzling discovery in order to support a controversial thesis, which gathers at present ever more supporters around itself. The universe cannot have originated in such a way as it is propagated up to date. In other words, the Big Bang theory is wrong. But what has it with the backgrounds of this self-confident assumption on itself? The problem of the Big Bang. Basically, the concept of the Big Bang describes nothing else than the common emergence of matter, space and time from an original singularity. But how is it possible for us to at all reconstruct the literal beginning of everything? Well, we owe this to the circumstance that the universe has always been expanding. However, the universe does not expand into existing space. It is rather the space itself which becomes bigger incessantly. If one considers the process now retrogradedly, it is possible to calculate back to the starting point of this development. As an outstanding proof for the correctness of the Big Bang theory again, the proof of the cosmic microwave background radiation is considered. This nearly isotropic radiation fills the entire cosmos and embodies a relic from the early phase of the universe. However, one thing should not remain unexpected. The corresponding theses and models explicitly do not deal with the actual Big Bang, but with the immediate period after it. More precisely, we move here in a frame of so-called Planck time, and 400,000 years after the cosmic birth. What happened within the mysterious Planck time, which describes the smallest possible time interval for the laws of physics known to us, is completely uncertain. And although the Big Bang is firmly established in the ranks of the scientific community, it is not free from criticism. Consequently, the theory is not capable of deciphering the how and the why of it all. What led to the fact that 13.8 billion years ago, something arose suddenly from the nothing? Can something form all at once from the nothing? Was the process set in motion in any way, or was it pure coincidence? The assumption of cosmic inflation is also accompanied by some exciting question marks. In simple terms, this describes the phase in which the universe expanded rapidly within tiny fractions of a second. Now, however, Russian cosmologist Andrei Lindy suggested back in the 1980s that most of the universe has always continued to expand forever. This process would come to a standstill only in some bubble-shaped partial areas in which individual sub-universes form. Thereby, each cosmic world would contain its very own values of the natural constants and thus also individual physical laws. The end as the beginning. No matter whether the Big Freeze, the Big Crunch, or the Big Rip, even if the individual theories differ from each other in some aspects, they all reach the same conclusion: the universe will end one day. But what would be if the fate of the cosmos is not sealed with it still for a long time? Is the truth subject to an eternal cycle of decline and rebirth? Or in other words, if an end is always followed by a new beginning? In fact, some experts argue that the Big Bang was in fact a big bounce. The model of the Big Crunch says that the universe will literally collapse one day in the distant future. The initial assumption here is based on the fact that in trillions of years, gravity will become stronger than the effect of dark energy. Once this point is reached, the expansion of the cosmos will henceforth reverse into an accelerating contraction. At the end of this process, a single black megalock will remain, containing all matter and eventually swallowing itself. Now it is conceivable that just this structure serves from now on as a primordial seed of a new universe, and that this cycle repeats itself up to all eternity. The explanations of the physicist Nikodem Popolowski of the University of New Haven strike into a similar notch. He locates our entire universe in the interior of a black hole. Thus, in the heart of one of these objects, once a kind of primeval seed had ripened, which finally burst and paved the way for the unfolding of the cosmic world. Consequently, black holes would thus also serve as natural gateways connecting two universes, with the restriction that the galactic door can only be passed through from one side. Admittedly, the idea of a multiverse, a big bounce, and a black hole as a portal are undoubtedly intriguing. However, just like the Big Bang, these models are not capable of answering the before and why questions. Stephen Hawking once said that time itself only began with the Big Bang, which is why dealing with the before basically makes no sense. But who knows, perhaps the collapse of this belief is just a new James Webb discovery away.
Death of a star. Even for the most overwhelming objects of the cosmos, nothing is forever. So it is now slowly time for the so-called Wolf-Rayet star WR124 to say goodbye to the galactic stage. Thanks to the James Webb Telescope, we can all marvel at how spectacular the approaching stellar death is visually. Taken with the near-infrared and mid-infrared optics, the detailed image shows us the final stage of the celestial body before it turns into a glistening bright supernova. Meanwhile, the stellar giant, which is about 30 times heavier than our Sun, is shedding virtually its entire shell. In this way, the object, which is about 15,000 light-years away from us, has already lost a quarter of its original mass. Yet the radiantly bright structure slumbering in the center of the breathtaking swath is the actual star. In the meantime, it has reached a temperature of 25,000 degrees Celsius, which makes it about 5 times hotter than the Sun. However, the vast amount of gas and dust that the dying star is currently hurling into the cosmos are by no means lost. The material released will serve as raw material for new stars and planets in the future. Cassiopeia A. What is still to come for the Wolf-Rayet star WR124, Cassiopeia A short, Cass A, has already done. It has completed the last chapter of its stellar life and said goodbye in the course of an explosive supernova. In the process, a new James Webb image in the mid-infrared now gives us an unprecedented view of the remnants of this brute event. Most excitingly, the stellar explosion occurred just 340 years ago, making Cass A the youngest known remnant of an exploded massive star in our home galaxy. Accordingly, Cass A now offers experts a unique opportunity to examine the debris field in detail and perform a kind of cosmic autopsy. In this way, the researchers hope to reconstruct what kind of star it originally was and how it exploded in detail. Compared to the images from past space telescopes, the Webb images offer a revolutionary level of detail. Information that previously seemed invisible can now be studied in detail. To give you a sense of the cosmic scale, while the stellar remnant is about 11,000 light-years from our Earth, it covers an area of 10 light-years. As is well known, the length measure of a light-year indicates which distance the light covers within 1 year in a vacuum, namely 9.46 trillion kilometers. The rings of Uranus. When we think of iconic ring planets, the first images that come to mind are those of the famous Saturn. However, at this point, we should not forget that Saturn is by no means the only planet in our home system that is orbited by such orbits. Okay, admittedly, compared to the rings of Saturn, the rings of Uranus are much more sparse. Therefore, the spectacular images that Webb recently took of the remote ice giant are all the more significant. A little info on the side. The term ice giant does not mean that most of the celestial body is a frozen form. Rather, it refers to giant planets that consist mainly of volatile chemical compounds. In the case of Uranus, these are water, methane, and ammonia. The fact that the rings, which are actually very faint, appear so strong and delineated in the image impressively demonstrates the unrivaled power of the James Webb Telescope. Before Webb provided us with these fascinating images, the Uranus rings were to be imaged by only 2 other instruments, by the Voyager 2 spacecraft, which passed the planet in 1986, and by the telescopes of the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. Pandoras Galaxy Cluster. Before the light emitted from the galaxy cluster Abell 2744 reaches Earth, no less than 3 billion years pass. The colossal structure, also known as Pandora's Cluster of Galaxies, was formed several billion years ago, when at least 4 smaller clusters collided. The immense gravitational forces prevailing within the 4 quadrillion solar mass cluster cause, among other things, some stars to be torn from their ancestral galaxies and have been drifting between them ever since. The image James Webb made of this exuberant area in the constellation Bildhauer effortlessly outshines all the previous ones in terms of detail, and also in this case still slumbered in the past years in the hiddenness. In the detail, they can fall back thereby on a refined natural assistance, the so-called gravitational lensing effect. This phenomenon, which is based on the enormous gravity of a megacluster, makes it possible to study even distant galaxies in the early universe, just like using the cluster as kind of a magnifying glass. While in the past, the Hubble Space Telescope could only view the central core of the structure, Webb removed those limiting binders, capturing the sparkling construct in all its glory. In the corresponding image, an estimated 50,000 individual sources can be seen in the near-infrared. View into the galaxy heart. Basically, without stars, there would be no planetary systems. However, the question of what influence star formation has on the structure of galaxies is still accompanied by some major puzzles. Consequently, from our terrestrial point of view, we are confronted with the problem that our location does not allow us to survey the Milky Way as a whole. Therefore, it seems all the more worthwhile to look beyond the galactic horizon. For this reason, astronomers are currently engaged in the exciting task of looking at 19 nearby galaxies with the near-infrared camera, NIRCam, and the spectrograph MIRI of the James Webb Telescope. The composite image of the galaxy NGC 628 shows how informative this investigation is for all of us. The technical view into the heart of the spiral galaxy reveals all imaginable subtleties. Some 32 million light-years from Earth, the extreme radiation of the cluster of stars at its center reveals itself as a turquoise region. Turquoise is also the color in which the newly born stars shine in the spiral-shaped ramifications of dust and gas. These countless dust and gas paths serve as galactic transport routes that supply the growing celestial bodies with new building blocks. Oldest known galaxy. And time travel is possible. Well, at least visually. With the help of the James Webb Telescope, experts were able to identify a galaxy that existed 300 million years after the birth of the cosmos. While 300 million years may seem like an enormous time span at first, in the astronomical context, it is no more than a fleeting blink of an eye. Even before the sensational discovery of glass Z13, Webb had succeeded in finding two collections of stars, glass Z11 and HD1, which existed 400 and 330 million years after the Big Bang, respectively. Particularly interesting, in the course of the detailed evaluation, the experts were also able to uncover some exciting characteristics of the newly discovered galaxies. For example, those collections of stars were still full-grown dwarfs compared to those that formed later. While the Milky Way is about 170,000 light-years large, it has up to 400 billion stars. Glass Z11 and Z13 were only 1,600 and 2,300 light-years long, respectively. Despite this, the structures were already surprisingly active. The high release of UV radiation indicates that the star formation at the time was both dynamic and intense. The first stars of the cosmos. The news that the James Webb Telescope may have detected a 200 million-year-old structure does not seem particularly spectacular at first, because as already mentioned, this period of time is not quite as enormous, measured by astronomical standards, as it sounds at first. However, this matter is somewhat different if we abled this very year number into a higher context. With the age of 200 million years is meant that the stars could have been formed just 200 million years after the Big Bang. If this assumption should be true, then the celestial bodies would advance to the first known stars of the cosmos. The Canadian scientists of the NIRISS Unbiased Cluster Survey Team got on this exciting track when they examined the first deep-field image of the telescope in detail. It did not take long before the so-called sparkler galaxy aroused the researchers' particular interest. Located about 9 billion light-years from Earth, it could be the most distant globular cluster detected to date. In detail, the experts discovered 5 globular clusters in the sparkler galaxy. Further research will now show how old the celestial bodies are in detail, and whether we can crown a new record holder in the category Earliest Stars of the Cosmos.
On July 21, 1969, at 3:56 Central European Time, a new chapter in manned spaceflight began. As is well known, this was the day when Neil Armstrong became the first human being in history to set foot on an alien celestial body. However, this prestigious date has always been accompanied by a huge problem. Millions of people are convinced that the moon landing was a brazen fake. Even more, if one follows the skeptics, we were never in the universe up to this day. The lunar hoax. It's one small step for a man, but one giant leap for mankind. These words spoken by Neil Armstrong 54 years ago are among the most famous quotes in human history. The historic event, whose live broadcast captivated some 500 million viewers, remains unforgotten to this day. After the successful Apollo 11 mission, NASA brought a number of other astronauts to the dusty surface of our constant companion until 1972. To date, 12 humans have been scheduled to set foot on Earth's only satellite, and currently, several space agencies are making plans to return to the Moon in a timely manner to establish permanent bases and mine rare resources. But what would you think if we told you that all previous moon landings and space descents were nothing more than meticulously staged fakes? Given today's zeitgeist, with the internet community massively questioning virtually every headline, you might think that this serious theory is comparatively new. But this is a fallacy. As early as the 1970s, doubters sensed a large-scale conspiracy on the part of governments and space agencies. According to them, the finish line of the space race was pure propaganda aimed at deciding the technological struggle between the West and East in favor of the USA. Moreover, the staged moon landing was perfectly suited to distract attention from other current grievances, including the violent protests against the Vietnam War and the assassination of Martin Luther King. But as it is so often the case, the money factor also played an overriding role. NASA's $30 billion budget would have been massively cut if the space agency had failed to demonstrate success. So the final suspicion is based on the fact that the US government did not deceive the world, but was itself led around the nose by NASA. If you like, the mother of all conspiracy theories is called "We Never Went to the Moon: America's $30 billion Swindle." This was the title of the supposedly revealing book that Bill Kaysing published in 1976. In essence, the suspicions can be summarized as follows. The state of technology in the 1960s would not have made a moon landing possible under any circumstances. Instead, those responsible built a secret film studio in Area 51 to shoot the faked moon scenes there. In any case, the Saturn rocket has always been launched unmanned. The 3 Apollo 1 astronauts who died during a fire in the capsule were deliberately murdered to keep the hoax going. The same fate is said to have befallen 7 other NASA employees who toyed with the idea of bringing the truth to light. The arguments on the test bench. But what did the Apollo 11 astronauts actually have to say about the serious allegations? Well, Buzz Aldrin found his very own way to deal with the conspiracy theories in September 2002. At that time, a certain Bart Sibrel showed up outside his Beverly Hills hotel. Then the 72-year-old responded to the accusations that Aldrin was a coward, liar, and thief with a proper uppercut. However, flying fists are not the only means used to defend the moon landing. Let's now take a look at the most well-known arguments of the doubters and see what the opposing side has to say. First of all, there is a problem with the waving flag. On the appropriate photo and film recordings we see, how the US flag rammed into the moon's soil flutters obviously. In this regard, skeptics point out that this is simply not possible. After all, the celestial body has no atmosphere. And if there is no wind on the moon, what would have set the flag material in motion? Well, the counter-argument says that it was not the wind at all that made the starry banner blow. Rather, we are dealing with the results of oscillations in a vacuum after contact with the flagpole. These oscillations and vibrations were caused by the hammering or the straightening of the flag. In addition, later photographs would show that the flag rested completely motionless after the vibrations had subsided. The missing stars. Another point critics pounce on is one that is missing from the footage. Where are the countless stars? How can it be that the sky above the lunar surface is simply pitch black? Shouldn't there be thousands and thousands of shining objects sparkling towards us? The missing stars would show that the pictures were not taken on the moon, but in a darkened hall on Earth. On the other hand, it is simply not possible to capture images that show very bright and very faint objects at the same time. In order to capture the stars in the lunar sky at all, very long exposure times would have been necessary. But since the mission was completed during the lunar day, this would have resulted in the remaining scenery being completely overexposed. The argument that also later space pictures showed a starless sky does not convince the alternative circles particularly, because after all, also these missions had been faked. Strange markings. The fact that on many NASA photographs the crosshairs of the cameras are to be seen supplies in and for itself still no cause for wild speculations. After all, these were the markings that were integrated into the camera for surveying purposes. But the situation is somewhat different if we consider that the crosses are sometimes covered by other objects on the lunar surface. According to the doubters, this is proof that we are dealing with cobbled-together photo montages. However, this phenomenon can be explained by an effect known to photographers as bleeding. This refers to the unwanted blending of color boundaries. On closer inspection, this effect can be easily seen. The crosses are often only partially covered. On some photographs, the opposing side would even like to have made out some letters, which suggests that stones were marked as props. The official explanation, however, says that these supposed markings are due to the increasingly poor quality of the copies floating around the internet. Unusual shadows. If the sun is the only source of light on the moon, how can it be that many photographs show shadows that are not parallel to each other and also have different lengths? Is this due to the many different spotlights that were used to set up during the fake landing at Area 51? Well, not necessarily. One explanation is based on the fact that the lunar surface is not flat, that is, not in one plane. Transferred to the nature of the surface, this means the shadows that fall on the elevation of the ground sometimes appear shortened, while those that fall in a depression of the ground are partially lengthened. The fact that the shadows do not run parallel is said to be due to a distortion of perspective. The Mythbusters also wanted to get to the bottom of the much-cited shadow accusation. In 2008, they recreated the landing site of the mission to scale and used a single light source as the sun. In the flat model, the shadows fall as the conspiracy theorists expected, in parallel. However, when the hills were included, the shadows cast looked the way NASA's photos show us. The moon heat. The moon is a celestial body of extremes. While the thermometer climbs to 130 degrees Celsius on the day side, it drops to 160 degrees below zero on the night side. In view of the intense heat that prevails on the sunlit region, a fundamental question arises. How are landing shuttles, sensitive equipment, cameras, and above all people, supposed to survive in the scorching heat? Well, the proponents of the moon landing put forward the following fact. Surface temperatures are not equal to air temperatures. Where there is no atmosphere, no air can heat up, which would affect the equipment and the astronauts. In addition, it should be noted that the Apollo 11 mission was completed neither on a lunar night nor on a lunar noon. Far from these extreme conditions, an average temperature of 20 to 25 degrees prevailed at the landing site. Further arguments. The list of controversial issues is far from over at this point. The radiation exposure in the so-called Van Allen belt, the debate about the faked moon rocks, and the question whether the computer technology of the 1960s would have made it possible to carry out such an ambitious undertaking are also repeatedly at the center of the discussion. But there is one thing we must not forget. If NASA, or whoever, really faked the moon landing, this secret was not guarded by a tiny elite circle, but by thousands of people. According to this, about 400,000 people were involved in the planning and implementation of the Apollo program at that time. In view of this, some people ask themselves whether the effort that was necessary for the cover-up was not much higher than that for a real moon landing. Were those involved really condemned to absolute silence or even killed in the case? If such a large-scale secret operation directed against the own population was actually implemented, what does that mean for the rest of the historiography? Are such deceptions possibly part of the everyday life? Or should we rather be careful not to get too lost in such disturbing mind games?
We are tiny. Thanks to a new sensational discovery, the inconceivable dimensions of the universe are impressively revealed to us. In the gigantic expanses of space lurks a colossal structure that turns even our Milky Way into a gigantic dwarf. But what mysterious objects have the researchers tracked down? How big is it? And what does this unexpected outgrowth mean? The view of the starry night sky is simply overwhelming. But while thousands and thousands of objects sparkle at us in the filament, we quickly lose the understanding for the true dimensions of the cosmos. As you know for sure, our solar system is located in the Milky Way, and the radius of our home galaxy, in turn, is quantified at 52,850 light-years. Briefly to the memory, the light year is not a time unit, but an astronomical length measure, which indicates which distance the light covers within 1 year in a vacuum. The corresponding value is 9.46 trillion kilometers to reach the nearest galactic neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy. The fastest man-made object would need almost 7 billion years. To the classification, our Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Let's imagine the Milky Way as a snowdrift that extends over an area of 10 kilometers. While each snowflake corresponds to one star, there would be about 3 snowflakes per cubic meter. And lo and behold, our mighty Sun, which in our minds is often the measure of all things cosmic, would not even be as big as a virus in this diagram. Now, however, giants slumber in the universe that dwarf even these impressive proportions. Basically, there are galaxies in the cosmos from whose centers gigantic streams of particles and radiation emanate. These structures are formed as a result of the interaction of matter and the supermassive black holes that lurk at the center of the stellar clusters. Radio galaxies are also among these cosmic lighthouses. While these gravitationally bound assemblages produce the radio radiation that gives them their name, the jet pairs emitted can sometimes travel millions of light-years into space. The bottom line is that giant radio galaxies embody the largest structures in the entire cosmos, formed by individual galaxies. And yet, as impressive as these outgrowths of the universe may be, they are also still overshadowed by enormous question marks. Indeed, astronomers do not know what mechanism underlines their extreme size. This is not least because giant radio galaxies are extremely rare. Of the 1,000 known representatives, only 100 are larger than 6 million light-years. Accordingly, it is difficult to study them in detail. But in order to change this situation, a team led by Martin Oy of Leiden University devoted itself to the task of adding further research objects to the star maps. To this end, the experts turned to the radio antennas of the European Low Frequency Array. Because this observatory spans several European countries, it can detect radio emission at different wavelengths with extreme precision. And fortunately, the galactic search for clues was crowned with success. About 3 billion light-years from Earth, the researchers identified a full-grown colossus, a giant radio galaxy whose radio jets occupy an apparent size of 20.8 arc-minutes in the sky. Or to put it more graphically, if we could see the jets with the naked eye, they would be about the size of the full moon. Based on the data collected, the experts determined that the structure must be at least 16 million light-years long, equivalent to about 100 Milky Ways strung together. In the case of where radio jets are not quite perpendicular to the field of view, they could be even longer. But either way, we are dealing with the largest radio galaxy ever discovered. The experts didn't have to search long for a suitable name. The structure was named Alcyonis after one of the largest giants from Greek mythology. Against the background of the enormous dimensions, the astronomers were even more surprised when they realized that the starting point of the radio jets is relatively small. Thus, the corresponding galaxy produces only a few stars and hosts about 10 times less radiating celestial bodies than the Milky Way. The black hole in the center also seems rather small, with 390 million solar masses. Furthermore, it seems to absorb only a little matter. These circumstances in turn pose great challenges to scientists because they clash with the common theories about such radio galaxies. In fact, the hypotheses state that the size of the radio jets depends directly on the mass of the central black hole and the parent galaxy. However, the nature of Alcyonis proves that this is not necessarily the case. But how is it that the structure is so gigantic despite this? Well, the experts have not yet found a clear answer to this question. They assume, however, that the environmental radio galaxies could play a decisive role. According to this, Alcyonis is neither in a so-called void, an empty region, nor in a densely populated zone. Instead, The radio galaxy appears to lie in a filament, that is, a filamentary connection of visible and dark matter between large galaxy clusters and superclusters. However, we do not know at this time whether the position in the filament favors the formation of such large radio jets, or indeed whether it has any influence at all. The future will tell if researchers can figure out this exciting mystery. On the trail of life. The James Webb Telescope was developed for a very special purpose. It is intended to revolutionize our knowledge of the universe. To this end, the most powerful space telescope of all time not only takes a look at the first luminous objects of the cosmos, but also analyzes other celestial bodies with regard to their potential habitability. While the search for extraterrestrial life is often set on exoplanets orbiting a star other than the Sun, a new discovery shows that the extraterrestrial building blocks of life also lie dormant in our home system. Jupiter's moon Europa, for example, has long been suspected of hiding an ocean of liquid water beneath its massive ice crust. However, water in permanently liquid form is by no means the only prerequisite for the development of Earth-like life. The element of carbon also plays an overriding role. However, since the frosty satellite lacks the geysers that continuously transport water from the subglacial sea into space, its chemical composition was considered unknown for a long time. Against this background, no one can say whether the hidden ocean was potentially life-friendly or not, a circumstance that, thanks to the James Webb Telescope, could soon be a thing of the past. In fact, two research groups at once turned to Webb's near-infrared spectrometer and high-resolution cameras to search for carbon dioxide on Europa's ice mantle. While previous studies have suggested that the element is present in the geographically young areas of the Moon, past experts have been unable to uncover the origin of CO2. However, the spectral data provided by Webb now prove that there is indeed an elevated presence of carbon dioxide in a celestial body's icy crust. In addition, the researchers found that the element is not present there in the form of pure CO2 ice, but as a mixture of different salts and ice water. At the end of the study, the conclusion was that the carbon dioxide most likely comes from the subglacial ocean, or in other words, that the ocean contains an element essential for the development of life. Puzzling expansion. To err is human, and not even Albert Einstein was immune to being dramatically wrong at times. For example, the creator of the theory of relativity was for a long time firmly convinced that the cosmos was a rigid, unchanging construct. To make the expansion of the universe postulated by other physicists null and void, he even added a cosmological constant to his equations, a step that the insightful Einstein later described as the greatest folly of his life. And even though the incessant expansion of the universe is now part of the scientific consensus, it continues to push experts to their limits. Observations of the past, for example, already show that the Hubble constant has some inexplicable discrepancies. Basically, this fundamental quantity of cosmology describes the speed at which the universe is expanding. However, the universe does not enlarge into an existing space. It is rather the space itself which becomes steadily larger. Since this process already began with the Big Bang, experts refer to this cosmic background radiation when deciphering the expansion rate. This nearly isotropic radiation in the microwave range, which fills the entire cosmos, embodies a relic from a time shortly after the birth of the universe, and is considered outstanding evidence for the Big Bang theory. Against this background, the Hubble constant is 67 kilometers per second per megaparsec. The problem? This theoretical value simply does not agree with reality. Different distance measurements show that the corresponding value amounts to 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec. The universe expands thus faster than it should actually. An astronomical mystery, which was also confirmed by the James Webb Telescope. The collected data coincide with those which had been already seized with earlier research series. What the background of the Hubble discrepancy is currently completely unclear. It is conceivable that this circumstance makes us aware of our own arrogance. Perhaps we have overlooked something in our previous exploration of the universe. For example, some researchers believe it is possible that behind the accelerated expansion rate lies a force that has not yet been taken into account in the standard cosmological model. This could be an exotic form of dark energy or dark matter, but even if this were the case, we would probably not be much smarter afterwards. Although both dark energy and dark matter have a fundamental influence on the process of the universe, their existence has not yet been experimentally proven. However, the experts also do not rule out the possibility that our common understanding of gravity is flawed, or that there are fields or particles in the gigantic expanses of the cosmos that are currently completely unknown to us. At the end of the day, therefore, the expansion puzzle has not been unraveled by the use of the James Webb Telescope. Instead, it is only deepening. Love learning about the most exciting discoveries and greatest mysteries of the universe? Then hit the subscribe button and never miss a new video again.